Hello designers. Today we're going to create a collage that appears to be made by pasted paper on Photoshop. This is going to be an entirely digital collage, but the idea here is to simulate the look of a collage that I would do by hand using several different pieces of textured papers. So you can see here my example that I was working on prior to making this video. I created this collage using a picture of my son, and I isolated each of the parts of his face and his body into separate areas that I then replaced with the textures of these different paper patterns. So I'm going to show you guys how to get started. In this example, I'm going to be using this picture of my beautiful fur baby here. And I know that I want to focus on just the head and the neck. So I'm going to use my crop tool, tool number 4? No, 5. Tool number 5 to just go and crop out the excess image surrounding the head and the neck, the parts I don't need it. Press enter when you're happy with your crop. And now that I eliminated all those parts of the image, I'm just going to do my trick where I select Control A to select the image, Control C to copy it. And I'm going to go and create a brand new document from scratch by going to File and New. And now the idea is for me to print this out. So I'm going to select the print preset and I'm going to select letter size. And I'm going to call this one Paper Collage and click Create. Now that I have this brand new document created, the paper collage document, I can go in and having copied this image with the Command Control C, use Command V on a Mac or Control V on a PC to paste it in, and I can see it fits perfectly. Now, here's what I want to do. I know that I want to do a close-up, to be honest with you. I don't really want to deal with the pillows, the couch, and all that other stuff. So I'm going to hit Control T to expand the image using Free Transform. So I can focus more on her beautiful face and more on her torso. Now I haven't done this type of collage on a dog, even though she's not a dog to me, she's a baby princess, but I'm very curious to see how that's going to look. So press enter when you're happy with your changes. Now I just want to select the dog herself. I don't really want the background. So I'm going to use my good old friend, the quick selection tool in tool number 4. You can kind of toggle in tool number 4 between quick selection and magic wand. In this case, I'm just going to select quick selection. Now I could go and try to select her to the best of my ability, or I could go in my options bar and select subject. And Photoshop is going to try to do its best to select the part in the image that it senses as the main subject of my photo. Okay, it did a fairly decent job, but I definitely need to go in here and fix some of these areas because it got some of the background. It eliminated some of her ear. So these are areas that I can easily fix by zooming in on the image. And to get rid of these parts of the selection that it got by mistake, I'm just going to make sure my quick selection tool is selected. I'm going to lower my brush size a little bit since I'm doing these details and hold down Alt. And you can see when I'm hold down Alt, it turns from a plus to a minus, which means I'm deleting from the selection. So I'm going to just go and delete very quickly those areas of the image that I don't want, and then add those areas I do want. So notice I zoomed in and I lowered the brush size considerably for my quick selection so that I could focus on those details. So many of my students, for some reason, just don't like to zoom in, and it makes it a lot harder for them to see what they're doing. All right, that looks pretty decent. I definitely could do a much cleaner selection, but for the purposes of what I'm going to do, it doesn't need to be perfect. Now, I'm just going to go hit the zoom tool and zoom out for a minute. Having selected the dog, I'm going to go to the select menu at the top of my workspace and inverse so that now the area surrounding the dog is selected, not the dog herself, and then hit delete on my keyboard and I can just basically eliminate the background. Now again, that selection is not my best. It's quite choppy, but for the purposes of what I'm going to do, it's not even going to show, so I'm not really going to worry about that choppiness. What I want to do is actually destructively apply the threshold adjustment because I want to isolate the parts of her beautiful face and her body into black and white areas, similar to a black and white photocopy. So since I'm working destructively, I don't want another layer piled on top in my layers panel. Instead, I'm going to go to the image menu and adjustments, and I'm going to look for the threshold adjustment. And when I apply threshold adjustment, you can see that automatically the image is being separated into these black and white areas. And I can adjust how much black and how much white is in the image by dragging on the threshold level, like so. So I don't want to get rid of all the detail, but I don't want the image to be fully black because that wouldn't be fun. So I'm just going to try to find a happy medium between these two very contrasting colors, black and white. I think 144 as a level is good. You guys are going to adjust it depending on whatever image you're using. I'm going to click OK. Alrighty, so here's what I want to do. I'm going to select all of the black in the image now and isolate the black, just the black, on its own layer. So to do that, I'm going to use my magic wand tool, click inside the black, and now I see some of the black is selected, but not all. Now, I don't want to spend my time trying to select every piece of black in the image, so I'm going to go to the select menu at the top of my workspace and click similar. And when I do that, I can see that there's now selections pretty much everywhere that Photoshop senses the color black. Now I want to make this selection go into its own layer. So I'm going to hit Control J, and you guys will see, let me make my background invisible so it's clear to you. This is the previous layer. I'm going to call this one base layer or something like that so I know what it is. And I can't spell. And then the top layer, this is just the black. So you can see, based on all this transparency, that all of the white in the image is not relevant anymore in this layer. It's not there. It only took the black. So I'm actually going to call this layer black layer or something, just so you can call it whatever you want. It reminds me what it is. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to take the white and put that on its own layer. So I'm going to make that base layer visible again and make sure it's selected. And then using my magic wand tool again, I'm going to click inside the white. And now I can see some of the whites was selected, but not all of it. So I'm going to go to the select menu and similar. And now all the white is selected. Hit Control J, and I can see now that has been isolated on its own layer. So you can see just the white in the image. So once again, I'm just going to double click on that layer and select and name it white. Alrighty. And now I don't really need that base layer anymore, so I could delete it, but I'm just going to leave it invisible for now. What I want to do is start working on the different areas right here of the black layer. So the first thing I want to do is I actually want to replace the color black with some kind of interesting paper texture. You could see, oh, that's the base image. You can see I was doing that with this picture of my son when I started applying all these paper textures that already come included with Photoshop by default over all the areas that were originally black in the image. And then I started using slightly less textured paper slightly less textured paper textures. I don't know if that makes sense, but slightly less textured paper patterns over the white areas in the image so I could actually see a contrast between light and dark. And that's kind of similar to what I want to do here. I'm going to go ahead and apply a pattern overlay over each of these different layers. So for my black layer, for example, I'll get started with that one. I'm going to go to my FX icon at the bottom of my workspace and select pattern overlay, the pattern overlay effect. And now you can see that a lot of the image was already replaced with the pattern that I already had selected from working on the previous project, which is this very light, mildly textured paper pattern. But that's not really the one that I want to use today. So I'm going to click on that little menu to open up all the other patterns. You can see I already had selected several of the paper patterns that are available within Photoshop. And there's a lot of really interesting, beautiful paper patterns to make it look like this is something that you did by hand, maybe using mulberry paper, like this one, that's just beautiful, or maybe using scrapbook paper, or any of those kind of specialty papers. If for whatever reason you don't want to use these particular patterns, you can always go and open up the menu and click on that little gear icon and load different kinds of patterns. So let me just try, just for kicks, to select this one called Artist Brushes. And I'm going to click OK to replace my selection of current patterns. And now you can see I don't know why it's not applying. You can see the different patterns that I just loaded. Kind of makes it look like a canvas, like a very gritty canvas weave. So you can try those as well if those are more to your liking. I actually think I like this one. I like that really gritty, textured canvas weave. It makes it look not so much like a pasted paper collage, but like a tapestry in my opinion. And I'm kind of digging that. So I'm going to leave that for now. And then if I want to go and maybe scale up the pattern, like if I wanted to make it smaller so I wouldn't necessarily be able to see every part of the weave, I could go and scale it down, or I could scale it up if I wanted that texture to be really obvious. So I think I'm going to leave the percentage at about 450 because I do want to see that really beautiful, obvious texture. And I'm going to click OK. So that's one layer down. I'm going to now do the second layer, which is the white layer. So again, I'm going to select that layer, the white layer. So this area right here, make sure I select my move tool. This area right here, that's what I want to replace with some kind of pattern. So I'm going to go to the FX icon and pattern overlay. Now the last pattern that was selected was the one I was working with before. So I want to create a very obvious contrast from light to dark. So I'm going to click that pattern, that little gear icon to select different patterns and go back to the color paper pattern category because I know there's several patterns here that I really want to use. For example, I love this one pattern that makes it look like some kind of really delicate mulberry paper. But I want to select a warm kind of color and something that you're obviously going to be able to tell that this was the light area in the photo. This one is kind of cool. It looks like college ruled paper like you would use in school. This one I love, this mulberry paper type pattern, but obviously it's a little bit conflictive with the other pattern that I'm working with in the darker side, so I'm gonna use something that's a little bit more harmonious. It doesn't detract from this really strong pattern here. So I'm just gonna look through the selections of different pasted paper patterns and select one to use on my final work. This one looks like graph paper, that's funny. I'm actually loving this one a lot. I think I'll try scaling it bigger. But this, I just noticed the bigger I scale it, it does get a little bit pixelated. So just something to consider. I think I'm going to scale it small then so that the feathers are still visible. The feathers and the texture are still visible, but not quite so distracting. And I'm going to click OK. So you could now go and create some kind of background, since right now I just have transparency, export your final draft and call it a day. But me being the maximalist that I am, I'm not quite happy with it yet. When I was working on this example with my son's image, I wasn't happy that I only had like those two different textures there. So I wanted to do a little bit more work on the portrait and add a few more textures with those different patterns. So if I look closely, I have several different ones right now. I have that really beautiful mulberry paper style that I was showing you guys earlier. I have this really light kind of stained paper. I have the look of ruled paper here, and then I have this pink scrapbook type paper pattern. So altogether, that's 4. Now to create that look, if you're interested, what I actually did is I copied some of those layers, the black and white layers, and then basically I replaced the pattern. So I'm going to try doing that with the white layer. Hit Control J to duplicate it. Now this is the copy, as you can see here. I'm just going to click Pattern Overlay and select a different pattern. Let's say I'm going to go for something warm, something a little warmer than I was using before. Yeah, let's leave it with this one maybe. I'm a little bit indecisive, but I'm going to go with this one. And maybe scale it up so I can see more of that texture. Now, it completely overshadowed the pattern that I have underneath here, and I don't want that to be overshadowed. I just want to use some of this warm texture in some areas, not all. So what I'm going to do for this copy is I'm going to click on the layer mask icon at the bottom of my workspace. And then I'm going to purposefully select the areas that I still want to show that beautiful pattern. So using my brush tool, I'm going to make sure I have a fuzzy, soft, round brush and lower my brush size considerably because it's quite big. Maybe too big. If you can't, for whatever reason, see your brush size, like if it shows like this, it's because you have caps lock on. So just undo caps lock so you can actually see the circle showing you how big your brush is. And then I'm going to make sure black is selected as my color and basically go and mask out the areas where I might want to see that texture underneath. So let me try that again. So I didn't like that so much. I'm going to do maybe areas right here in the face. Okay, now a layer mask is considered non-destructive editing, meaning you can go back at any other point in time. If you decide, okay, this is trash or I'm not happy with it, I want to start over, you can go back at any point in time to that mask, use white as your color, and mask in any areas that you made a mistake on or you're just not happy with anymore. So I'm just going to go in and fix some of those areas. I want to create more of this kind of effect where you can't quite tell where one texture starts and the other one begins. So to do that, I think what I'm going to do is just increase my brush size a little more. And that might be a little bit too big. All right, that's good. And work with that. So you can see here, there's a slight blend of these two patterns. There's not quite like a very, what's the word I'm looking for, like distinct division from one pattern to the other. I love how the color of this particular pattern is so close to my baby's actual fur. If anybody was wondering, she's an American bully and she will be 2 years old in March of 2021. And she's the love of my life. Okay, so I'm really happy with that. I could do the same thing that I did with that black pattern if I wanted to, but I think for now I'm just going to keep it, I was going to say minimal, but that wouldn't be quite right because the patterns I'm using are quite maximalist, especially this one, this dark pattern. So I'm just going to go now and work on that background. So for the background layer, I could basically do the same thing, or I go and apply a pattern overlay so I can, add a little bit more of that pasted paper kind of feel. But in this case, I'm just going to go to the bottom of my layers panel and select the new fill adjustment layer and select pattern. And similar to what I was doing um, with the pattern overlay effects, I'm just going to go and select a pattern that I might want to use for the backgrounds. So I'm just going to go and browse through these categories. And again, if you're not happy with what they presently are showing you, you can go in to the pattern selector, click the menu icon, the gear icon in the menu, and select a different pattern set. But I'm just going to keep using these pasted paper patterns. I really, really like them. Well, I was going to select something a little bit more minimal, but let's be honest, you guys, I'm not a minimalist. I appreciate the minimalist philosophy, but I'm just not a minimalist myself. So that pretty much concludes it. I selected the same pattern with a mulberry paper kind of feathers, texture kind of feel, and I'm pretty happy with it. I had increased the scale of it so it would look a little bit different from when I first applied that same exact pattern in the face of the puppy. So I'm going to scale it up just a little more, scale it up to about 700% and click OK. And that right now pretty much concludes this project. At any point in time, if you decide, well, I'm not so crazy about that pattern and you still have that PSD file, you can always go and double click the pattern overlay effect and just change the pattern to create a different kind of aesthetic altogether. But this right now looks like I did it by hand. It has like a very gritty kind of textured feel. It almost feels like I could reach into my computer and touch it. So I'm totally loving that. And I'm ready to go and export this as a final draft. If I'm going to print it, I'm going to want to export it as a PDF. If I'm going to show it off on the web or my social media, I might want to export it as a PNG or a JPEG so that it's compatible across all browsers. And that would pretty much wrap up this project. I can't wait to see what you guys create. Hit me up if you guys have any questions. Peace out.